Hello everybody, welcome back to the course. I'm Magnus Frampton from the University of Fechter. Our topic today, importing and exporting ideas, methods, practice in social work. This is one of two videos. Yeah, there's an interesting image here for you guys to have a look at. What are all these ships doing here? I'm going to explain that later. I want to think about importing and exporting in social work. And maybe it's nice if I kick us off with examples from our country. Most of you guys are born in Germany. Let's think of this from a German perspective. Let's take an example from Germany going back something like 100 years to the 1920s. Alice Salomon, one of our key figures, she translated and reworked Mary Richmond's really important seminal early work on social diagnosis. And I've got a copy of the old American book here. Salomon translated that, reworked it to the German context, publishing it in German, Soziale Diagnose. So we've got a new concept in our German social work that we've imported from overseas. Ever since, Germans have taken over US concepts, translating these word for word. Many of our words, much of our terminology actually comes from the English language. Sozialarbeit, Schulsozialarbeit, Jugendarbeit, you've got street work. You know, you can make a very, very long list of terms which we've gotten from elsewhere. It goes both ways. It's not just a one-way transfer. Britons and Americans, we didn't have the concept of social pedagogy in the past. This is very much a German or a continental European discipline. Brits and Americans didn't have that. In the 20th century, there really wasn't a way of translating it in a satisfying way. Now, of course, we have social pedagogy. There's books written on it. You can study it. So this import and export goes both ways. Lovely. Let's investigate it further, this mobility of our social work. So I think we've got a global social work community today. And in this community, a method, knowledge, a theory from one country can be used in another country. And this is what we're going to be thinking about in this session. Exchange. We're going to think about importing. We're going to think about exporting social work ideas. And in that order, let's start with the idea of importing social work. Why? Why may social work practitioners in a particular country wish to import, bring in methods or theory, practice from another country? Why? Why? Scratch your heads and natter with your telephone partner. Pause here. What did you come up with? There's a whole bunch of reasons, isn't there? One reason that's very, very big right now, in all of the sciences which are linked to professions, if something works in a particular place, there's going to be a tendency to try it out elsewhere. And that's how it's worked with medicine for a long, long time. If you have some medical discovery in one place, that would quickly spread around the world. And our politicians are interested in what kind of practice works best, what kind of practice is particularly effective and efficient. And there's a real discourse around what we call evidence-based practice. So we talk about good practice, we talk about best practice. If it's working there, let's try it here. That's the logic. Good, good. Sometimes we import because we have to, because we really don't have some kind of practice, some kind of practice method, some kind of theory. So we import because we don't have it otherwise. Okay, so there's gaps in our own social work, so to say. Another reason which is really quite interesting, which I should stress, sometimes we import theory or practice because that which we have, we don't value. We have our practice, we have our theory, but it lacks prestige in our community. And this is a little bit weird, so maybe it's nice if I give you a concrete example of this. Western countries like Germany have got a very, very institutionalized psychiatric system. So if you have some kind of mental health problem, if you have depression, let's say, we've got lots of medicine for you. We have large, well-resourced hospitals, institutions where if you want to, you can actually live and stay for a fairly long time. Other countries, global south countries, don't normally have that. Their own psychiatric care would be very much informal. It would be in the community, you know, done by family members, neighbors, friends, often without access to the medication that we have. Such countries are then interested in copying our institutionalized psychiatry. My example here is interesting. They're copying us because it's high prestige, because it has a good reputation. Actually, the evidence in terms of healing, recovery, quality of care isn't necessarily in favor of our Western institutionalized model. So my example, being a little bit grotesque, stresses this point. Sometimes we import because of the prestige of that method, of that theory, of that practice in another country, not necessarily because our own methods of care aren't good in the first place. So hold on to that idea. A final reason, which really was very important historically, going back a couple of generations, this was really, really relevant. For many countries, say in the post-World War II period, they didn't really have an established social work profession. You know, the profession as such didn't really exist. You couldn't train to be a social worker in many places, for example. And if you would train to be a social worker, your own professors wouldn't have been qualified in that particular country. And indeed, having trained, your work opportunities may have been limited. You know, there wasn't a social services department office in your local town. So for many countries, social work is a very, very new profession. For many countries, even today, it's a very, very young profession indeed. And that's obviously a reason why there's been importing. Countries without their own social work would be borrowing social works or parts of social work from elsewhere. So we've investigated why a country may be interested in importing social work. Now I'm going to flip the question over. My next question for you to scratch your head over. Why export? Let's think about exporting methods, ideas, research. Consider with your partner, lecturers, practitioners, researchers, they often they publish their ideas in other countries. So I've written a paper, I'm now going to present it in this international conference in Canada. Why? Why? Why are we keen to export our ideas? Why are we keen to export our social works? I'm going to be a little bit provocative now. I'm going to encourage you to be a little bit cynical or mistrustful. I'm accepting cynical or mistrustful answers just as much as all those nice, pretty answers. So pause here, scratch your heads, and natter with your partner. What did you come up with? Reasons for exporting. Starting with the nice reasons, there's definitely a wish to improve practice in another place. That's how it works in any practice-based discipline, in any profession. You know, in medicine, if I've discovered some therapy and I think it works, it helps people, obviously I want people in other countries to be helped by my new therapy as well. So a genuine wish to share knowledge, improving practice in other, maybe distant places. That's a nice reason why I may wish to export. A desire to have an impact or influence outside of one's home country. Germany's a nice example here. You know, we have a lot of social work. We have a big social work scene, a big German language social work scene. But after a while, it feels quite compact. And if you've had a bit of success in your home country, it is quite exciting to then try and have an influence outside of those national boundaries. And getting invited to that talk in London or New York is obviously exciting. So there's an aspect here, you know, kind of appealing a little bit to human vanity, you know, that wish to be seen as important elsewhere. So morally speaking, we're on more problematic territory, and taking that idea to its kind of cultural national extension, sometimes as representatives of our country, we're selling our national practice, we're selling our national traditions, in this case of social work. Maybe because we even believe in the superiority of our national social work. You know, what we're doing is good. You know, guys, learn from it. You know, check out what we're doing. We have really excellent social work here. And that belief in the excellence of our social work may be based on some level on a belief in the excellence of our culture, of our nation in a more general sense. And this is my point, which I'm really addressing with this provocative image, the Spanish Armada ships. This is about colonialization. You know, this is about building colonies. We're doing something really, really well. Why don't you try what we do? Let's try and establish it in your place, building colonies. And this idea is obviously a very, very problematic one. If it's true, this is very, very a cautionary tale, so to say, for us to bear in mind. Probably the most interesting book that got me thinking about this is one of the oldest ones dealing with the topic. Midgley was one of the first to really, really articulate in depth how this can happen and how it can be dangerous. And look at the title of his book, Professional Imperialism, a wonderfully thought-provoking title, isn't it? Global South social work often took place in colonial contexts. That means, you know, within the institutional settings of the colonizing power. So, you know, welfare offices like schools were often simply imported from those powers colonizing countries. And it's a very, very problematic route to the history of social work in these places. So if you can get your hands on a copy, well worth checking out. I'm going to come to a close now, but investigate these ideas further in a second talk. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for listening.